Lesson 9, I will use the place value chart and metric measurement to compare decimals. So today we're going to be talking about decimals and we're going to be comparing them. In that we're going to be saying if they're greater than or less than. But in order to start comparing these decimals, we're going to use a real life metric measurement. So we're going to talk about meters and we're going to talk about which one's shorter and which one's longer in order to compare the decimals. So in your math binder, you have a lesson 9 template. We're going to be using these first two tape diagrams, or actually the first four. We will not be using the portion at the bottom, but we will be using these first two tape diagrams. All right, so I want you to take a look at this yellow piece of tape here. And then I also want you to take a look at this meter stick. Now, the first thing you're going to notice is that this meter stick doesn't start at 0. But I want you to imagine that this piece of yellow tape is really, really long and it goes way off the page, just like the meter stick. So if you could see the beginning of the yellow tape, it would start at the 0 of the meter stick. So we're just moving all the way to the end of the meter stick because this is really where you measure at the very end anyway. So what would be the length of this yellow tape according to this meter stick? Well, we have 67 meters. So if we wrote that as a fraction, how many, these are actually centimeters, and there's 100 centimeters in a meter. So as a fraction, this would be 67 hundredths of a meter. Okay, there's 100 meters on a meter stick, or excuse me, 100 centimeters on a meter stick, and we have 67. So we have 67 hundredths of a meter. On your first template, I want you to shade in your tape diagram to represent the length of the yellow tape on the meter stick. Okay, so let's go back to that template that we had. All right, so we're going to express 67 hundredths. 67 hundredths. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 boxes, right? We don't have 100. So each of these boxes has a value of what? Has a value of 10. We have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. So let's go ahead and shade 60. So we have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Now, in order to be able to shade the 7 at the end, we're going to have to divide this last box into 10 parts. All right, so let's go ahead and do this. Let's divide this into 10 parts. Now, they're going to be small, so you're going to want to have to be very careful. So this will be 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 lines makes 5 boxes, and then 4 lines on this side. 2, 3, 4. So that makes 10 boxes. So now all I have to do is come back and shade 7. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so this is 67 hundredths. Now let's write this as a decimal right here at the end. So let's write 0.67, 67 hundredths. Okay, all right, let's go back to the next one. All right, so we have the yellow tape is 67 hundredths. Now let's take a look at this blue tape. So again, we're pretending that the blue tape starts way off this edge of the computer, back at the 0 mark of the metric ruler. Now we're going to go all the way to the end of the meter stick to where the end of the blue tape is, and we have 59 centimeters. So as a fraction, that would be 59 hundredths of a meter. So we're going to go back to our tape diagram, and we're going to shade 59 hundredths. Okay, so this time we're shading 59. Okay, so let's do 10, 20, 30, 40, there's 50. All right, now let's divide our last one into 10 parts. I like to divide it in half first, and then do 5 on each side. So 4 marks makes 5 parts, so let's do 4 marks on this side. All right, so that's 10. So now I'm going to do 59 So I need 9 more. So basically, I'm going to need all of them but this last one, right? Because if there's 10 parts, I know I'm going to shade all of them except for 1. Okay, now let's write this as a decimal. So 59 hundredths. Okay, so I have 2 decimals here. I have 67 hundredths, and you don't have to rewrite these, but I'm going to rewrite these over top of each other because I want the decimals to line up, okay? Just like they would in a place value chart. So I have 67 hundredths, and then I have 59 hundredths. Now remember, our learning target for today is to be able to compare fractions. So if I wanted to compare 67 hundredths to 59 hundredths, which would be longer? Which tape was longer? The yellow tape, right? Because when I look, neither one of them have a whole number, so the zeros are the same, so I have to look to the tenths. And when I look to the tenths, 6 tenths is greater than 5 tenths, so 67 hundredths is longer than 59 hundredths. Okay? All right, let's try one more. All right, so let's go to another piece of tape here. All right, so this time we've got a yellow and a blue piece of tape again, and they're both on the same page. And we're going to shade both of these on our tape diagrams. So we have the yellow one. So how long is the yellow one? It is 34 hundredths of a meter. Okay, so let's go ahead and shade the yellow. Let's go back to our tape diagram and shade 34 hundredths. Okay, so let's scroll down to the bottom here, and we're going to do 34 hundredths. I'm going to go ahead and write 34 hundredths as a decimal down here so that I don't forget when I'm shading. All right, so 34 hundredths. So let's come back and let's find a highlighter. All right, so I'm going to shade 34. So this would be 10, 20, 30, and then in order to do 4, I'm going to have to come back and divide this into 10 parts. So let's divide this into 10 parts. Okay, so I'm going to shade 4 of those. 1, 2, 3, 4. These are so small. Okay, so this is 34 hundredths. Okay, all right, let's go back to the other piece of tape really quickly. All right, so the other piece of tape here is the blue tape, and let's look at where it goes to. It goes to 40 hundredths. So 40 hundredths. So we're going to write that as a decimal. All right, so let's go back to our tape diagram here. All right, so for this one, we're going to do 40 hundredths. So I'm going to write this as a decimal. Okay. All right, so I've got 0.4. Now, I can put the 0, but it has no value. Remember, 4 tenths is the same thing as 40 hundredths, and we're going to see that right here when we get ready to shade, right? Because look at what happens. I'm going to shade 10, 20, 30, 40. Notice that's the same thing as 1, 2, 3, 4 tenths. So it doesn't matter if I put that 0. Okay? Now look at our model here. Which one is longer? Well, this was the blue tape. So 4 tenths is longer than 34 hundredths. But that doesn't seem right, does it? Because if you just look at these 2 decimals like this, you've got 34 here, and you have 4 here. How can that be right? But remember, there are no ones, so we go to the tens. And the tens are larger than the hundredths. It's like comparing 34 cents or 34 pennies to 4 dimes. Even though you've got 34 pennies, the 4 dimes have more value. Some kids like to put a 0 right here so they can say, oh, it's kind of like comparing 34 hundredths to 40 hundredths. But this 0 really has no value because remember, 4 tenths is the same thing as 40 hundredths. We're going to see a little bit more of this as we get into our problem set. Okay, so let's go ahead and turn to our problem set now, and let's practice a little bit more. All right, so on your problem set, you're going to see they already shaded for you, which kind of saves us some time, doesn't it? It says, express the lengths of the shaded parts in decimal form. Write a sentence that compares the two lengths. Use the expression shorter than or longer than in your sentence. Okay, so let's look at this one. These are tenths, right? And we have 1, 2, 3. So let's write this in decimal form. So we have 3/10. All right, and then the next one, we have 10, 20. So we have 2/10. So we can go ahead and put 2/10. And then I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hundredths. So 27 hundredths or 2/10 and 7 hundredths. Now again, you're thinking, I'm comparing 3 to 27, but you're really not. You're comparing 3/10 to 27 hundredths. So remember, if it makes you feel more comfortable, you can think to yourself, well, these 3/10s are the same thing as 10, 20, 30. You can add a 0 here to make you feel like, okay, I'm really comparing 30 to 27s. So now we have to write a sentence that compares the two lengths. So we're going to say 3/10 is longer than 27 hundredths. Okay, let's try the next one. All right, I want you to pause the video and I want you to go ahead and write in decimal form what each of these meters are compared to, or excuse me, what each of these meter lengths are in decimal form. And if you feel comfortable going ahead and writing that sentence, go ahead and write that sentence over here to the side saying which one's longer. So I want you to pause the video and then I want you to come back. If you get stuck, press play. Okay, so let's take a look at this one. I've got 1, 2, 3 tenths, and then I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hundredths. So I've got 3/10 and 5 hundredths or 35 hundredths. And here I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 tenths. Okay, so again, we're faced with this 4 compared to 35. But remember, if it makes you feel more comfortable, you can always add the 0. It doesn't change the value. So now it's like 40 hundredths compared to 35 hundredths. So my sentence would be 4/10 is longer than 35 hundredths. It would be okay if you said 35 hundredths is shorter than 40 hundredths. It doesn't matter to me which one you put. Now we're going to list all 4 of these lengths in order from least to greatest. So we're going to go back up here and look and see which ones of these will be the shortest. So all of these have no whole numbers. So I'm going to look to the tens place. I've got 3/10s, 2/10s, 3/10s, and 4/10s. So which would be the shortest? Well, the one with the 2/10s. So we're going to start with 27 hundredths. That's the shortest. Now I've got 2 that have 3/10. This has 3/10 and no hundredths. This has 3/10 and 5 hundredths. So next I would say 3/10, and then I would say 35 hundredths. It's okay if you left the 0 on this 3/10. It doesn't change the value. And then last would be 4 hundredths, or 4/10 or 40 hundredths would be the largest. Looks kind of odd, doesn't it? Because you're thinking 27, 3, 35, 4. But remember, if you want to leave those zeros on there to make it make more sense to you, you can, but it doesn't change the value. All right, now we're going to look at some metric mass. We're going to look at what things weigh. So we're going to look at each of these scales below, and we're going to put an X over the items that are heavier than the avocado. So we're going to compare. So let's look at the tens place. So this is an avocado right here. It's kind of hard to tell on your sheet because it's in black and white, but this is an avocado. And we want to know what is more or weighs more than this 2/10. So let's look in the tens place. So this has a 2 in the tens place, and this has a 1 in the tens place. Would this be heavier than the avocado? No, because you can remember, you can think of the avocado, if you added that 0, you could say, well, that's like 20 hundredths. All right, so let's look in the tenths place of the bananas. It has a 6 in the tens place. Is it heavier? Yes, it is. So let's put an X over it. And what about the grapes? It has a 6 in the tens place. Yes, it is heavier than the avocado too. And we could also think of this bananas. Remember, we could add that 0 if it made us feel more comfortable. Okay, now I'm going to go into split screen here because in the next page, we're going to have to use these metric masses that we just talked about here. And I want to be able to see both pages. Okay, so we're going to express the mass of each item on the place value chart. This is another way to help you compare. So let's start with the avocado. So we had no ones, but we had 2 tenths. And remember, our decimal goes right here, okay? And then the apple, we had 0 and 12 hundredths. And then the bananas, we had 0 and 6 tenths. And then the grapes, we had 0 and 61 hundredths. So if you look at the place value chart, when you look at the first digit, which is a ones place, you can see they're all 0. So that doesn't help us compare. But if we look at the tens place, we can see really quickly that the apple weighs the least. And then the avocado would be next. And then for the bananas and the grape, we would have to go to the hundredths place. So the avocado is heavier or lighter than the apple? Well, the apple has a 1 in the tens place and the avocado has a 2. So the avocado is heavier than. Okay, I'm going to go back to full screen here. I don't need that picture anymore. All right, and the bunch of bananas, look at the bananas compared to the grapes. They both have a 6 in the tens place, but the bananas has no hundredths and the grapes have 100. They're very close, aren't they? But the bunch of bananas is actually lighter than the bunch of grapes. Not by much though, only 1/100th of a kilogram or a gram. That's not much. Okay, now we're going to look at metric volume. So we've got 6 graduated cylinders here, and this is what you would use if you were in chemistry and you were trying to measure the amount of liquid of a substance that you had. So these are measured in liters. So you can see we have 6 tenths, 3 tenths, etc. So we're going to label all of these into our place value chart to help us compare them. So I'm going to do the first one for you. You can see that we have 0 and 6 tenths for cylinder A. And then we have 0 and 3 tenths for cylinder B. I want you to pause the video and finish recording C, D, E, and F in this place value chart, and then I want you to press play. Okay, so let's just double check to make sure that you recorded everything correctly. So you should have had for C 0.9, for D 0.97, for E 0.19, and for F 0.48. It's really important that we have accurate information if we're going to compare. Now look at what the place value chart does. It lines up all the ones, all the tenths, and all the hundredths. This really helps us to compare because the ones place isn't going to help us because none of these volumes have a whole liter. They're all tenths and hundredths. So if I'm going to compare, like in A, 9 tenths to 6 hundredths. So I've got 9 tenths and 6 hundredths. So which one is going to be greater? Well, C is going to be greater. So 9 tenths is more than 6 tenths. Now I want you to pause the video and I want you to try to do B, C, and D all by yourself. And then I want you to come back. If you get stuck, press play and I will walk you through it. Okay, so let's take a look at B. Hopefully you already did this. Let's see if you got it right. So we've got 48 hundredths compared to 6 tenths. So remember, even though this is 48 and this is 6, this has a 6 in the tens place and this has a 4 in the tens place. If it makes you feel better, you can think of this as 60 hundredths compared to 48 hundredths. And that will help you to understand that this is actually less than. Okay, now we're going to compare 3 tenths to 19 tenths. So you can see that we have a 3 in the tens place and a 1 in the 19 hundredths. So if I wanted to add a 0 to this to make it say 30 compared to 19, it helps you to see that this is actually greater than. Okay, if you want to add those zeros, it does not change the value and it's perfectly okay. As a matter of fact, I might go ahead and add a 0 here. All right, so now when I write these in order from least to greatest, I can either write the volume. You could have written the volumes, or you could have written the letters in order from least to greatest. It doesn't matter to me, but it does say write the volume of the water, so I'm going to write the volumes. Okay, so the smallest one, I'm going to start over here. The smallest one would be 1900ths because it has a 1 in the tens place. So I'm going to check that off. And then I go 4993, so 3/10 would be next. It's okay if you left that 30/100ths. It's not wrong. Okay, and then I'm going to do 4800ths. And then I go to 6/10. Again, if you left the 0 and made that 60/100ths, it would not be wrong. And then I've got 9/10 and 97/100ths. Okay, so we spent a lot of time today talking about comparing decimals. And it's really important that you remember that even though this is 6, 6 can be greater than 19 if it's 6/10 and 1900ths. So you can always add a 0 to compare 60/100ths to 1900ths. That's just a little trick to help you until you feel a little bit more comfortable.